71 days. That number should be front page of every newspaper in this country. It should be the first thing every Canadian hears when they wake up in the morning, and it should be tattooed on the inside of every politician's eyelid in Ottawa. Now, I know it sounds really graphic. I know it sounds so intense, but it's 71 days until the single most economic deadline in generations. The deal that keeps the auto workers in Windsor employed, steel workers in Hamilton, and that BC father who cuts lumber to pay his mortgage employed. And today, the clock is ticking. The United States sat down with Mexico and scheduled a former trade negotiation. Specific date, specific city. May 25th, Mexico City. They are on the table. Canada, well, we got a really cool press release. Now, before I get into the hard stuff, I want to say something very clearly. And I mean this, as someone who leans right and doesn't hand out compliments to the Liberal government easily, what Carney did with this council is brilliant. It is leadership. It is a masterclass. It's absolutely incredible. Look who's in the room. You got Erin O'Toole, Lisa Raitt, Jean Charest, former Quebec Premier, CEOs of BMO, CN Rail, steel executives, auto part manufacturers, union leaders. This isn't a bunch of Liberal insiders. This is a Canada Council, and the instinct behind it that this crisis belongs to all of us, that you need every credible voice, regardless of their jersey. This is exactly what a prime minister should do, and this move is just, it's so good, right? It's just perfect. But remember, there's a difference between building the best possible team and actually getting in the game. And right now, Canada needs to ask itself honestly, are we in the game? So let's talk about where things actually stand. July 1st is the hard deadline for CUSMA review, the deal that governs 2/3 of everything Canada sells to the world. If no renewal is reached, the U.S. will trigger an annual review, meaning every single year for up to a decade, Canada sits across the table and negotiates its economic future every year. The U.S. trade representatives have already said on the record that Canada is behind Mexico. Not a little behind. And that no negotiations between Canada and the U.S. has happened between October 25th and March of 26. 5 months gone. And you know why? Because of a commercial the Ontario government made when they had Ronald Reagan's voice say tariffs aren't helping the economy. That's the legit reason. But May 25th, Mexico City, Mexico has their date already scheduled and ready to roll. That doesn't exist for us in Canada. We don't have that date. And if July 1st passes without a deal, CUSMA doesn't die cleanly. It becomes a zombie agreement. Technically alive, but locked into a 10-year cycle of annual review where the United States can cancel the whole thing with 6 months' notice. Anytime, any year, any negotiation that goes sideways. That's not a trade deal. That is a hostage situation with a 10-year countdown. And here's where it gets real interesting. Last night, the government's own chief trade negotiator went on camera and told Canadians that the July 1st, and I quote, is a checkpoint and not a cliff. A checkpoint. 71 days of the most important economic deadline in generations, and the government just switched the words from a deadline. Now, when a government starts redefining its own deadlines before negotiations, we have to ask ourselves a couple of questions. And the main thing here is that doesn't look like confidence. That is preparation. And the question every Canadian needs to sit and ask is, what are we preparing for? LeBlanc, the minister responsible for this entire file, went on national television and said, if we wanted to accept a bad deal, we would have done so months ago. And sure, that is a very popular talking point. I read that all the time. Why would we accept a bad deal? And that is a valid talking point. I see that everywhere. It's better to have no deal than a bad deal. But is it? Is it actually? Because 2/3 of your trade, if it doesn't move, that spells a huge catastrophe for every single Canadian. So I can understand wanting the best deal. I can understand hating the idea of a bad deal, but I can't accept the idea that we have nothing. That's not negotiating. That is damage control dressed up as confidence. And Poilievre's response was pointed. And again, I don't like to overshoot Pierre, but he said something that's deserving of reflection here. He said the only talks Carney is doing are YouTube videos with Isaac Brock and holding up little figurines in his office. He said nobody knows Carney's plan, probably not even him. Now look, for all intents and purposes, we're not in government. We don't really know, right? But nobody does know the plan. But Pierre's plan, although not perfect, is a starting place. A council is not negotiating strategy, right? Having this dream team isn't a negotiation. It's a support structure to have one. And right now, Canada can't afford to confuse the two because the man sitting on the other side of the negotiation, the U.S. trade rep himself said, Canada bidding its time is the worst strategy he has ever heard. And that's not a conservative talking point. That's the man Canada needs to cut the deal with. 71 days. Carney built the right team. I genuinely believe that. But the best roster in the world means nothing if the coach doesn't get off the bench. And last night, the government called the deadline a checkpoint. I hope, I pray that they're right. I genuinely do. Because the alternative, 10 years of annual negotiations with an administration that has already proven beyond belief that it's hostile towards us, that's not a strategy. That is a slow bleed. And the thing about a slow bleed is that by the time most people notice, the damage is already done. And that's Tarek Unfiltered.